Blood stained the snow crimson as Sarah Thornwood clutched her youngest to her breast, the winter air burning her exposed skull where the raiders had taken her scalp. The 6 children, trembling and sobbing, huddled against their mother as rough hands shoved them toward the frozen lake. Their screams died in the thin mountain air as the ice cracked beneath them, swallowing their bodies into the dark water. The raiders' laughter faded with their departing horses, leaving only silence across the vast white landscape. Beneath the surface, Sarah's lungs screamed for air, her children's small hands clutching at her dress as they sank deeper. Just as consciousness began to fade, a shadow broke through the ice above them. Who was this mysterious woman diving into certain death to save strangers her people had been taught to fear? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 6 months earlier, Sarah Thornwood stood on the porch of her modest homestead, watching the late summer sun paint the distant mountains gold. The hand-carved wooden music box her husband James had given her before his departure played a gentle melody beside her. Its familiar tune transported her momentarily back to their Boston parlor, a world away from this harsh frontier. "Mama, Thomas won't give back my doll." 6-year-old Mary's voice shattered the brief reverie. Sarah tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and sighed. "Coming, dear." She closed the music box, silencing the connection to her past life. Inside the cabin, chaos reigned as it often did with 6 children aged between 2 and 12. Thomas, her eldest, held his sister's cloth doll above his head with the exaggerated weariness of a boy forced too quickly into a man's responsibilities. "Thomas, please," Sarah said, her voice firm but gentle. "Remember what your father said before he left." The boy's shoulders slumped slightly. "The man of the house must be kind to those in his care," he recited, reluctantly returning the doll to his sister. Sarah nodded, her heart aching for her son who carried the weight of his father's absence. James had been gone nearly 8 months now, fighting in a war that seemed impossibly distant from their remote mountain valley. That evening, after settling the younger children, Sarah sat at the rough-hewn table with Thomas, teaching him his letters by lamplight. Beyond their window, winter approached with unforgiving swiftness. The first snows had already dusted the higher elevations. "Will father be home by Christmas?" Thomas asked, his pencil pausing above his slate. Sarah touched the music box that never left her side. "I pray so, every day." She didn't share her worries about the coming winter, the dwindling supplies, the rumors of increased tensions with local tribes, the isolation that would soon envelop them as snow made the mountain passes impassable. 2 days later, riders from the settlement 10 miles south brought mail and supplies. Among the letters was one from James, its edges worn from the long journey. "My dearest Sarah," it began, "the fighting continues with no end in sight. I fear I shall not return before the spring thaw." Sarah read it twice before folding it carefully and placing it in the music box alongside his previous letters. That night, after the children slept, she allowed herself a moment of quiet weeping. Morning brought new challenges. The water pump had frozen overnight, and clouds pregnant with snow gathered on the horizon. Sarah wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders and ventured to the well, breaking the ice with determined strikes from an iron rod. "Mrs. Thornwood," the voice startled her. Mr. Peterson, their nearest neighbor from 3 miles away, approached on horseback. "Thought you should know, the Mitchell family's place was raided 2 nights ago." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Raided? By whom?" "Hard to say for certain. Some say renegades, tribes broken from their leaders. Others say it's deserters turned bandit." He looked uncomfortable. They didn't leave survivors to tell the tale. That night, Sarah checked the loading of James's old rifle and placed it beside her bed. As she wound the music box, its gentle melody seemed too delicate for this harsh land. In the darkness, while her children slept, Sarah penned a letter to her husband by candlelight. "James, my love, I try to be strong as you asked. The children grow daily. Thomas has your determined brow, and little Edward spoke your name yesterday. But I confess my fear grows with the winter's approach. Strange tracks have been seen near the north pasture, and rumors of violence shadow the valley. I pray for your safe return with every breath." Outside, the wind shifted. Sarah paused, her pen hovering above the paper as she listened. Something or someone moved in the darkness beyond their walls. The music box's melody faded to silence as she reached slowly for the rifle. Dardide moved through the winter forest like a shadow, her footfalls silent on the snow-crusted ground. A sacred eagle feather hung from her long black braid, swaying gently with each careful step. The mountains knew her. She belonged to them as surely as the pine and juniper that scented the crisp air. She had separated from her hunting party 3 days earlier, drawn by something she couldn't name, a pulling in her blood that her people recognized as the ancestors' call. Now, as the afternoon light filtered through bare branches, she made camp in a small clearing, building a fire with practiced efficiency. The flames rose, and Dardide closed her eyes, breathing in the smoke. At 32 winters, she held an unusual position among her people. Neither wife nor mother, she had chosen the path of a huntress and healer after tragedy had claimed her husband and infant son 8 years ago. Some whispered she was touched by spirits. Others said grief had made her strange. All respected her skills with bow, knife, and medicine. As night fell, Dardide reached into her deerskin pouch and sprinkled sacred herbs onto the fire. The flames turned blue-green, and the smoke thickened. She began to sing, her voice low and melodic, calling to those who walked beyond the veil between worlds. The vision came suddenly. Snow and blood, children's cries and water turned to ice, a white woman with her scalp torn away, 6 small ones drowning in frigid darkness. And somehow Dardide herself, diving into death's cold embrace. She gasped, falling backward onto the snow as the vision released her. The eagle feather gift from her father when she became a woman trembled against her cheek. She had seen her purpose, though it made no sense. Why would the spirit send her to save those whose people had brought such suffering to her own? The path is not for us to question, her grandmother had taught her, only to walk with courage. At dawn, Dardide packed her few belongings and began gathering what she would need. From hidden caches in hollow trees and rock crevices, she collected dried herbs for healing, yarrow for bleeding, willow bark for pain, pine resin for binding wounds. Into her medicine pouch went moss for bandages and sinew for stitching flesh. She paused at a stream not yet completely frozen and knelt to pray, offering tobacco to the water spirits. Her reflection stared back, high cheekbones, dark eyes that had seen too much sorrow, the small scar above her left eyebrow from her first hunt at 12 winters. Dardide, she turned to find Nahokans, a young hunter from her band, approaching through the trees. "Why do you travel alone when danger walks these mountains?" he asked, concern etching his features. "I follow the ancestors' path," she replied simply. Nahokans frowned. "The council worries. Renegades from many tribes gather to the north, men without honor who have broken from their people's ways. They attack both settlers and our own. Come back to the winter camp." Dardide touched the eagle feather. "I cannot. I have seen what must be." "Is it the settler woman?" Nahokans asked hesitantly. "There are rumors of one who lives alone with many children while her man fights in the white man's war." Something shifted in Dardide's chest. Confirmation. "What do you know of her?" "Only that her homestead lies 3 days' journey northwest, near the frozen lake beneath Three Finger Mountain." He paused. "My sister's husband says the renegades speak of her. They believe killing a white family will drive others from our lands." Dardide nodded, understanding now the urgency that pulsed in her blood. "Then I must hurry. You go to warn them." Nahokans asked, bewildered. "Why risk yourself for settlers?" Dardide looked to the snow-heavy sky. "The spirits show only parts of the path. I must walk it to see where it leads." As Nahokans reluctantly left, Dardide gathered her weapons, bow, quiver of arrows, and her war hawker, the curved tool used for both hunting and battle. Last, she tied her father's eagle feather more securely in her hair. The storm was coming. She could taste it in the air, feel it in her bones. She had 1 day, perhaps 2, to reach the frozen lake where her vision would become reality. With a silent prayer to the ancestors for guidance, Dardide set out into the gathering darkness, following an invisible trail toward an unknown destiny. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Thornwood homestead. Sarah stirred the porridge bubbling over the hearth fire, while 2-year-old Edward clung to her skirts. Through the window, she watched Thomas chopping wood, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Mary, fetch the Bible for morning readings," Sarah called. The family Bible, leather-bound and worn from generations of hands, was their anchor in this wilderness. James had insisted they maintain the rituals of civilization, even as the wilderness pressed in around them. Mary returned empty-handed, her small face puzzled. "I can't find it, Mama." Sarah frowned. The Bible always sat on the shelf beside her bed. "Check by the window." "Perhaps I left it there yesterday." Before Mary could move, 10-year-old William burst through the door, his face pale. "Mama, riders coming, not from town." Sarah's heart thundered. She grabbed Edward and hurried to the window. 7 men on horseback approached from the north ridge, not the direction of the settlement. Their dress was a strange mixture, some in buckskins suggesting native origins, others in tattered military garb. "Renegades," she whispered, remembering Peterson's warning. With practiced urgency born from frontier life, Sarah herded her children toward the root cellar.
Thomas, help your brothers. Mary, bring little Edward. 8-year-old Hannah clutched the missing Bible, found beneath a chair. Mama, should I bring this? Yes, quickly now. They never reached the cellar. The door splintered open with a terrible crash. Sarah pushed her children behind her as 3 men entered, their faces painted for war, their eyes cold. Please, Sarah said, one hand raised in supplication, the other holding Edward to her breast. We have little of value, but take what you want. The tallest raider stepped forward, a jagged scar crossing his left cheek. He spoke in accented English. We take everything. His gaze swept the cabin. Where is your man? Fighting in the war. We are alone. The raiders exchanged glances. One spoke rapidly in a language Sarah didn't recognize. The scarred man nodded and turned back to Sarah with a terrible smile. The settlers must learn. These lands are not for them. What followed happened with nightmarish speed. Rough hands seized Sarah and the children, dragging them outside into the biting cold. Thomas fought with the desperation of a child forced to be a man, until a blow to his head left him dazed. Sarah screamed and struggled until something struck her from behind. When consciousness returned, Sarah found herself being dragged through snow. Her head burned with unimaginable pain. Reaching up, her fingers met wet bone where her hair and scalp had been. Horror choked her as she realized what they had done. Through a haze of agony, she saw her children being pushed forward, sobbing and stumbling. The Bible lay trampled in bloodied snow behind them. Ahead gleamed the frozen lake that provided their drinking water during summer months. No, she croaked, understanding their intention. Not my children. The scarred leader yanked her up by her arm. You die slow in the cold water, like our people died when your soldiers burned our winter camp. Sarah clutched at his buckskin shirt. They're innocent children. So were ours. He shoved her toward the ice. The children's screams echoed across the valley as the raiders forced them onto the frozen surface. Sarah staggered forward, blood streaming down her face, desperate to reach her little ones. The youngest children slipped and fell on the ice. Thomas tried to gather them close, his young face a mask of terrified determination. A sharp crack split the air. The ice beneath them groaned. Sarah reached for Edward just as the surface gave way. The frigid water stole her breath as she plunged into darkness. Around her, small bodies thrashed in panic. She grabbed blindly, catching fabric, pulling a child. She couldn't see which one, close to her chest. Above, through the broken ice and water clouded with her own blood, Sarah glimpsed the raiders watching impassively from shore. Then they turned away, mounting their horses, satisfied that nature would complete their work. As the cold numbed her limbs and darkness edged her vision, a new shadow fell across the broken ice above them. Dardidi arrived at the frozen lake just as the raiders departed, their laughter carrying on the wind like crows' calls. Without hesitation, she sprinted to the jagged hole in the ice, dropping her pack and shedding her outer fur wrap. Below the surface, dark shapes thrashed weakly in the frigid water. The warhawker, her father's last gift before he died fighting soldiers, was warm in her hand. The curved, axe-like tool had taken many lives. Today it would save them. With practiced strength, she swung it against the ice, widening the opening. Then, taking a deep breath, she dove into the freezing darkness. The cold hit like 1,000 knives. Through water clouded with blood, Dardy spotted the settler woman, her scalped head a pale horror, clutching a small child while 5 others flailed nearby. Their movements were already slowing, death approaching. Dardy grabbed the closest child, a boy of perhaps 10 winters, and pushed upward, breaking the surface. With one powerful heave, she lifted him onto solid ice. Stay there, she commanded in halting English, learned from traders. Back into the deadly cold she plunged. The second child, a girl with hair like autumn leaves, was sinking fast. Dardy seized her dress and kicked toward the light, lungs burning. The girl sputtered and coughed as they emerged. 4 more times Dardy dove, each descent more difficult as her limbs numbed and her strength ebbed. The third child fought her in blind panic, nearly drowning them both before she managed to subdue him. The fourth was unconscious, a dead weight in her arms. The fifth, a tiny girl, had drifted beneath the ice. Dardy had to smash a new opening with her hawker to reach her. Last was the scalped mother, still clutching her youngest to her breast, both nearly gone. Summoning her remaining strength, Dardy wrapped an arm around the woman's waist and kicked upward one final time. On the ice, the children huddled together, shivering violently. The oldest boy, though barely conscious, had pulled his siblings close in a desperate attempt to share warmth. Dardy dragged the mother and infant from the water, laying them on her discarded fur. The woman's eyes fluttered, focusing briefly on Dardy's face with incomprehension before sliding closed again. The baby made no sound, no breath stirred his tiny chest. Working swiftly despite her trembling hands, Dardy turned the infant over, pressing firmly between his shoulder blades. Water trickled from his blue lips. She breathed into his mouth, her grandmother's healing knowledge guiding her actions. After 3 breaths, the child convulsed, coughed, and began to wail. The sound seemed to reach the mother through her stupor. Her hand groped blindly for her baby. "Live," Dardisty told her in English, pressing the crying infant into her arms. "Must keep moving." Using her hawker, Dardisty cut branches from nearby pines, quickly lashing them together with sinew to create a crude travois, a dragging sled. She laid her fur across it, then the mother and baby. The 5 older children she roused with stern words and gentle slaps to their cheeks. "Walk or die," she told them simply, pointing to the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "Bad weather comes." The oldest boy staggered to his feet, pulling his younger brother up with him. Who are you?" he stammered through chattering teeth. Dardisty ignored the question, wrapping her spare blanket around the smallest girls. "Help me," she instructed, placing the travois harness over her shoulders and nodding toward the rear of the sled. Understanding, the boy grasped one of the trailing poles. As the first snowflakes began to fall, Dardisty led the frozen, traumatized family away from the lake, following a path only she could see. Behind them, blood on the ice was already disappearing beneath fresh white powder, erasing all evidence of the day's horrors. The storm descended faster than even Dardisty had feared. Within an hour, visibility dropped to mere feet. The children stumbled forward, moving on instinct alone. The mother drifted in and out of consciousness, her wound leaving a trail of scarlet droplets on the pristine snow. Just as twilight deepened to night, Dardisty spotted the rock outcropping she sought, a sheltered overhang where they might survive until morning. "There," she pointed, her voice nearly lost in the wind's howl. Safety. The rock overhang barely deserved to be called a shelter, but it broke the wind's knife edge and allowed Dardisty to build a fire. Working methodically, she gathered what dry wood she could find beneath the snow and struck sparks from her flint onto a nest of birch bark. The settler children huddled together, watching her with eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Their mother lay unconscious on the travois, her breathing shallow, her scalped head a grotesque wound crusted with frozen blood. Dardisty removed a small medicine pouch from her belt. Inside were her most precious healing herbs, gathered through seasons of wandering the mountains. She selected yarrow to stop bleeding, pine resin to protect against infection, and willow bark for pain. "Water," she said to the oldest boy, handing him a hollowed gourd, from snow. As he filled it with clean snow to melt by the fire, Dardisty gently cleaned the woman's wound. Such injuries were not unknown in the wars between her people and the whites, though she had never treated one. The scalp was torn completely away, exposing the shining white of skull in places. The woman moaned, eyes fluttering open. "My children," she whispered. "Safe," Dardisty replied, pressing her back down. "Be still." The woman's eyes, clouded with pain, fixed on Dardisty's face. Recognition and fear dawned in them. "You're Apache." "Nende," Dardisty corrected, using her people's name for themselves. "I am Dardisty." "Why?" the woman asked, her voice barely audible. Dardisty didn't answer. How could she explain a vision? Instead, she crushed the yarrow leaves into a paste and began applying it to the wound. The woman gasped at the pain but didn't cry out. Dardisty nodded with grudging respect. This one was strong. The baby began to whimper, a weak sound that worried Dardisty. She finished binding the mother's head with strips of clean buckskin, then turned to the infant. His skin was too cool, his breathing too shallow. She pressed her ear to his tiny chest. The heartbeat fluttered like a trapped bird. Without warmth, he would not survive the night. Dardisty made a quick decision. "Here," she said to the 10-year-old girl, unlacing her own deerskin shirt. "Remove wet clothes, all of you." The children stared at her in confusion. "Now," she commanded, "wet clothes kill in cold." Understanding dawned on the oldest boy's face. "Do as she says," he told his siblings, helping the youngest with their frozen buttons and laces. Dardisty stripped the soaked garments from the baby and pressed him against her bare skin, wrapping her warmest fur around them both. Body to body was the surest way to share warmth. She motioned for the other children to huddle close around the fire, covering them with the remaining blankets and furs. "Sleep," she instructed. "Tomorrow walk more." As the storm raged outside their meager shelter, Dardisty kept watch. The mother's fever rose as the night deepened. Twice Dardisty had to force willow bark tea between her cracked lips. The baby gradually warmed against her chest, his breathing becoming stronger. Near midnight, the smallest girl stopped breathing. Dardisty noticed immediately. Handing the baby to the oldest boy, she moved to the child's side. The girl's lips had turned blue, her small body losing the fight against the cold. Drawing on her grandmother's teachings, Dardisty pressed firmly on the child's chest, then breathed into her mouth as she had done with the baby. The other children watched in terrified silence as she repeated the process again and again. Just when she feared it was too late, the girl sputtered and gasped. Dardisty turned her onto her side as she coughed up water that had remained in her lungs from the lake. "Hannah!" the oldest boy cried, tears streaming down his face. Dardisty placed the revived child between her siblings, ensuring she was well wrapped. Then she checked the mother again. The woman watched through half-closed eyes. "You saved her," she whispered. "Thank you." Dardisty nodded once, uncomfortable with the gratitude. She retrieved the baby from the boy and resumed her vigil by the fire. As dawn approached, the storm began to subside. The mother slipped into restless sleep, murmuring names: Thomas, Mary, William, Hannah, Alice, Edward. Her children, Dardisty realized, names strange to her tongue. The first grey light of morning revealed their precarious situation. The mother's wound had soaked through its bandages. The children, though alive, were weak from cold and hunger. And the raiders, Dardisty had no doubt they would return once they realized their victims had somehow survived. She had to get these fragile settlers to her hidden canyon, where the healing hot springs might give the woman a chance to survive. It would mean 3 days of difficult travel through deep snow. As she rebandaged the mother's head, Dardisty wondered why the ancestors had placed these lives in her hands, and what price she might pay for saving them. Dawn broke with painful brightness, sunlight reflecting off pristine snow. Outside their shelter, Dardisty crouched, studying the terrain. With a stick, she sketched a crude map in the snow, mountains, valleys, and the path that lay ahead. Inside, Thomas tended to his mother, whose fever had broken during the night, leaving her weak but lucid. She watched Dardisty through the shelter opening. "My name is Sarah," she said when the Apache woman returned. "Sarah Thornwood. These are my children, Thomas, William, Mary, Hannah, Alice, and baby Edward." Dardisty nodded once, acknowledging the introduction. "We go," she said, pointing to the sun. 3 days' walk. I know place, warm water from earth. Help heal head." She gestured towards Sarah's bandaged skull. The children looked doubtful, but Thomas stepped forward. "We'll die here without her help, mother," he said quietly.
Sarah closed her eyes briefly, pain etching lines around her mouth. "Yes," she agreed, "we owe her our lives already." Dardidi began preparations, packing her few supplies and reinforcing the travois. To her surprise, the children helped without being asked. The older ones dressing the younger in clothes now dry but stiff with lake water. "Can you stand?" Dardidi asked Sarah. With Thomas's help, Sarah managed to sit up, then rise unsteadily to her feet. Blood immediately soaked through her bandages, but she remained upright through sheer determination. "I can walk," she insisted. "Save the travois for the little ones when they tire." Dardidi assessed her with narrowed eyes, then nodded. The woman's strength would serve her well in the days ahead. As they set out, the 6-year-old Mary began to cry. "I'm hungry, Mama." Dardidi reached into her pouch and withdrew a strip of dried venison, breaking it into small pieces to share among the children. "Eat slow," she instructed. "Make last." Their progress through the deep snow was agonizingly slow. Thomas helped his mother, while William carried Edward wrapped in Dardidi's spare fur. The 2 middle girls struggled forward on their own, occasionally helped by their older brothers. By midday, Sarah's strength began to fail. Without comment, Dardidi helped her onto the travois, ignoring her weak protests. The journey continued with Thomas and Dardidi pulling the sled. Late afternoon brought new concerns. Dardidi halted suddenly, studying tracks in the snow ahead. Shod horses, 5 or 6 of them, heading west. "Raiders?" Thomas asked, his voice cracking. "Maybe," Dardidi replied. "Different path now." She led them on a sharp turn south, toward rougher terrain where horses would struggle. The decision added miles to their journey but might save their lives. As twilight approached, Dardidi spotted a stand of dense pines that would provide shelter for the night. While the children gathered branches for bedding, she checked Sarah's wound. The bleeding had slowed, but infection was a growing risk. Sarah watched Dardidi's face as she worked. "You speak English well," she observed. "Trade with whites sometimes," Dardidi replied. "Learn words." "Why did you save us?" Sarah asked the question that had clearly haunted her since the lake. Dardidi's hands stilled. "Ancestors show path," she said finally. "I follow." Sarah frowned slightly, not understanding. "Vision," Dardidi clarified, tapping her temple. "See you in water, see me help." "A vision," Sarah repeated. Her expression suggested she might have scoffed at such an explanation a few days ago. Now she simply nodded. "God works in mysterious ways." Dardidi finished rebandaging the wound in silence, recognizing the woman's reference to the white man's great spirit. As night fell, Thomas approached Dardidi, watching intently as she built a small, nearly smokeless fire. "Teach me," he said simply. Dardidi regarded him for a moment, then handed him her flint and steel. "Like this," she demonstrated, guiding his hands. After several several failed attempts, he succeeded in striking a spark. The boy's face lit with pride. "Good," Dardidi acknowledged. "Tomorrow, teach tracking." Sarah observed this exchange from where she lay with the younger children huddled around her. Something shifted in her expression, wariness giving way to cautious gratitude. That night, as the others slept, Dardidi kept watch. The new snow would cover their tracks, but she remained uneasy. They were vulnerable here in the open forest, days from her canyon sanctuary. She studied the sleeping family. These strangers fate had bound to her. The mother's courage reminded her of her own mother, who had died defending their camp from soldiers. The thought should have filled her with bitterness, yet instead she felt a strange kinship with this scalped woman who refused to surrender to death. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Their food was nearly gone, and a wolverine had raided one of Dardidi's hidden caches the previous autumn. They would need to hunt soon. As if sensing her thoughts, Sarah's eyes opened, meeting Dardidi's across the firelight. "We'll survive," the settler woman whispered with quiet certainty. "All of us." Dardidi nodded once, a silent pact formed between two women from worlds apart, united by the simple, fierce determination to live. The second day of their journey brought them to the base of a steep mountain pass, the only viable route to Dardidi's canyon. Grey clouds hung low, promising more snow by nightfall. "Up there?" Sarah asked, her voice weak but determined. She had insisted on walking again that morning, though her steps were unsteady. Dardidi nodded. "No choice. Other paths, raiders watch." As they began their ascent, 8-year-old Hannah stumbled, breaking through the snow crust and twisting her ankle. Examining the child's foot, Dardidi found one of her makeshift snowshoes had cracked, fashioned the previous evening from pine branches and strips of her own leather tunic. Without proper footwear, the children struggled in the deep snow. "Carry her," Dardidi instructed Thomas, who readily hoisted his sister onto his back. By midday, they had climbed less than a third of the way up the pass. The children's strength was failing, their small bodies not yet recovered from the ordeal in the frozen lake. Even Thomas, the strongest, began to lag. "Need food," Dardidi stated, surveying the barren slope. She spotted tracks in the snow, mountain hare. Motioning for the family to rest, she took her bow and moved silently into a copse of stunted pines. 20 minutes later, she returned with 2 small hares. Sarah watched with a mixture of relief and apprehension as Dardidi efficiently skinned and gutted the animals, then spitted them over a small fire. "Your people," Dardidi said as they waited for the meat to cook. "Why come to these mountains?" Sarah's hand went instinctively to her bandaged head. "Land," she answered simply. "The government gives land to those willing to settle it." "Land already has people," Dardidi replied, her tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. Sarah met her gaze. "Yes, I see that now." The children devoured the meat with desperate hunger. Even Sarah managed a few bites, color returning slightly to her ashen face. Strengthened, they continued their ascent. As they neared the summit, wind began to howl through the pass, driving snow into their faces. Dardidi's gaze darted constantly to the slopes above them. Something felt wrong. Thomas noticed her unease. "What is it?" he asked. Before she could answer, a low rumble echoed across the mountainside. Dardidi's eyes widened in alarm. "Run!" she shouted, grabbing baby Edward from William's arms. "There!" She pointed to a rocky outcropping 30 yards ahead. Thomas seized his mother's arm, practically dragging her forward. As the rumble grew to a roar, the younger children screamed as a massive wall of snow broke loose above them, cascading down the mountain with terrifying speed. Dardidi reached the outcropping first, shoving the children behind the protective rocks. She turned back to see Sarah and Thomas still struggling forward, directly in the avalanche's path. Without hesitation, Dardidi plunged back into danger. She seized Sarah's other arm, and together with Thomas, dragged the weakened woman to safety, mere seconds before the avalanche thundered past, obliterating everything in its path. Pressed against the rocks, the family watched in horror as their packs and the travois were swept away in the churning white death. Only Dardidi's medicine pouch, strapped securely to her belt, remained of their supplies. When the snow settled, an eerie silence descended. They were alive, but stranded at the pass summit, with night approaching and no food or shelter. "What now?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible over the wind. Dardidi surveyed their desperate situation. Without supplies, the children would not survive another night in the open, especially at this altitude. Must keep moving, she decided. Canyon half-day walk from here, down safer than up. As they began their descent on the far side of the pass, 10-year-old Mary stumbled upon something protruding from the snow, a broken snowshoe, not one of theirs, but larger and sturdier, made with a wooden frame and leather bindings. Dardidi examined it, her expression darkening. "Apache make," she said. "Recent. Your people?" Sarah asked. "Maybe." Dardidi's eyes scanned the slopes, or renegades. The implication hung heavy in the frigid air. They might have escaped one danger only to stumble into another. As twilight approached, Dardidi led them to a small grove of firs where the snow was shallower. Using branches, she constructed a crude lean
lean-to, while Thomas, following her instructions, built a fire with their last flint sparks. Sarah's condition had worsened after the exertion of their escape. Blood seeped through her bandages again, and her skin burned with renewed fever. "How far to your canyon?" Thomas asked, watching Dardidi apply the last of her medicinal herbs to his mother's wound. "Before next sunset," she replied, "if weather holds." That night, as the children huddled together for warmth, Dardidi remained vigilant. The broken snowshoe troubled her. If renegades were nearby, they would be tracking the family, and her. Among her people, she was known as a skilled healer and hunter. Among the renegades, she was known for something else entirely. Her brother, Naishe, was their war leader, and he would recognize her tracks. By late afternoon the next day, they emerged from dense pine forest to stand at the edge of a narrow ravine. Far below, a slender ribbon of water cut through stone, steam rising from its surface despite the winter cold. "There," Dardidi pointed. "Canyon." The children stared in wonder at the secret place hidden within the mountains. Ancient pictographs adorned the canyon walls, faded red ochre figures of hunters, spirit beings, and symbols unknown to the settler family. "How do we get down?" Thomas asked, peering over the edge at the steep descent. Dardidi led them half a mile along the rim, until they reached a nearly invisible path zigzagging down the cliff face. "Careful," she warned. "Follow exactly." Sarah, barely conscious and supported between Thomas and William, mumbled incoherently as they began their descent. Her fever had spiked dangerously high, and the bandages on her head were soaked through with blood and yellow discharge, signs of infection that Dardidi recognized with growing concern. The path down was treacherous, forcing them to move sideways in places where the ledge narrowed to mere inches. Dardidi carried baby Edward strapped to her chest, while Thomas helped his mother. William guided the two middle girls, and Mary, the second oldest, brought up the rear, her small face set with determination beyond her years. Halfway down, little Hannah froze, paralyzed by fear as a section of path crumbled beneath her feet. "I can't," she sobbed, pressing herself against the rock face. Dardidi handed Edward to Mary, and carefully made her way back up to the terrified child. "Look at me," she commanded, turning Hannah's face away from the dizzying drop. "See only next step, nothing else." With gentle firmness, Dardidi guided Hannah past the crumbling section. The rest of the descent continued without incident, though by the time they reached the canyon floor, darkness was falling fast. The bottom of the canyon felt like a different world. Protected from the harsh mountain winds, it was noticeably warmer. Steam rose from a series of pools that stair-stepped down the canyon, heated by some underground fire. Dardidi led them to a small cave set back from the hot springs. Inside, signs of habitation were evident: a stone fire ring, dried herbs hanging from the ceiling, and a simple pallet of woven reeds. "Your home?" Sarah asked weakly as they settled her on the pallet. Dardidi nodded. "When not with tribe." While the exhausted children collapsed near the fire Thomas built, Dardidi carefully unwrapped Sarah's head wound. In the firelight, the extent of the infection was clear, angry red streaks extending from the ragged edges, the exposed bone dull rather than shining. "Bad," Dardidi said simply. "Need hot water medicine." She mixed herbs from storage jars at the back of the cave, creating a poultice of unfamiliar plants, whose pungent smell filled the small space. Then she helped Sarah to the nearest hot spring, a milky blue pool whose minerals might help fight the infection. Under the star-filled sky, Sarah gasped as Dardidi slowly lowered her into the warm water. "Burns," she whispered. "Good burn," Dardidi assured her. "Medicine water." As Sarah soaked, Dardidi studied her face. The woman had lost weight in just days, her cheeks hollow, eyes sunken. Without proper treatment, she would not survive much longer. "Why you alone?" Sarah asked suddenly. "No family." Dardidi stiffened. "Had husband, had son." She paused. "Both gone." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. Dardidi helped Sarah from the pool and applied the fresh poultice to her wound. As they returned to the cave, Sarah leaned heavily against her. "My husband," Sarah said haltingly. "James, if he returns, finds us gone. First heal," Dardidi interrupted, "then worry for husband." Inside the cave, the children had organized themselves with surprising efficiency. Thomas and William had arranged sleeping spots using pine boughs, while Mary was feeding Edward small sips of water mixed with crushed pine nuts that she'd found in one of Dardidi's storage pots. "I am teacher," Sarah explained, watching her children with pride despite her pain. "Teach them, be useful." Dardidi nodded in understanding. As she settled Sarah for the night, applying the last of her medicine, distant howls echoed through the canyon. "Wolves?" Thomas asked nervously. "Not wolves," Dardidi replied, her expression grave. "Men." Outside, in the gathering darkness, she examined the canyon rim. Torches moved along the upper edge, searching. The raiders had tracked them, despite her precautions. She returned to the cave, where Sarah watched her with fever-bright eyes that still held awareness. "They found us." Sarah asked. Not yet, Doadidi replied. Canyon has many secrets. She hesitated, then added, my brother leads them. Sarah's eyes widened. Your brother? Why would he? Long story, Doadidi said, turning away. Rest now. As the family finally succumbed to exhaustion, Doadidi sat at the cave entrance, watching the distant torches. The canyon had protected her for years. She prayed to the ancestors it would shelter these innocent lives as well, even from her own blood. Dawn illuminated the canyon in soft golden light. While the children still slept, Doadidi prepared for Sarah's first full treatment in the hot springs. She gathered clay from a special deposit near the lowest pool, clay infused with minerals that drew poison from wounds, and mixed it with crushed herbs into a thick paste. Sarah watched through half-closed eyes as Doadidi worked. The night had brought no improvement. If anything, her fever burned hotter. Will I die? She asked directly, her voice a rasp. Doadidi met her gaze. Maybe. But fight hard, maybe live. Sarah nodded weakly. I've never been one to surrender easily. With Thomas's help, they moved Sarah to the middle pool, where the water was hottest. Steam rose in thick clouds, creating a natural sweat lodge effect. Doadidi removed Sarah's bandages, revealing the infected scalp wound in the harsh morning light. Bad spirit in wound, Doadidi explained, gesturing to the angry red streaks. Water and clay fight spirit. She eased Sarah into the milky blue water up to her shoulders, careful to keep the wound itself above the surface. Sarah gasped, then gradually relaxed as the heat penetrated her aching muscles. My grandmother, Doadidi said as she prepared the clay mask, was greatest healer of our band. She taught, body knows how to heal. We only help remove barriers. She began to sing softly, a healing chant passed down through generations. The melody echoed off the canyon walls, haunting and ancient. What are you singing? Sarah asked. Song for ancestors. Ask them help heal you. Doadidi carefully applied the clay mask to Sarah's wound, covering the entire top of her head with the thick grey paste. This stay until dry. Pull out poison. From the cave, the children emerged, blinking in the morning light. Edward fussed in Mary's arms, hungry and uncomfortable. Doadidi pointed to a bush with small red berries growing near the water's edge. Food. Safe, she told Thomas. Also fish in lower pool. I show how catch. While Sarah soaked, Doadidi taught Thomas and William to fashion simple fishing spears from reeds and sharp stones. By mid-morning, they had caught 3 small trout, beaming with pride at their accomplishment. Mary, watching the boys fishing, asked hesitantly, Can I learn too? Doadidi nodded. Girls hunt in my tribe, women strong. She demonstrated how to clean the fish, explaining each step. Mary listened intently, absorbing every word despite her young age. You speak our language well, the girl observed. Trade with whites many years. Doadidi replied. Learn words, teach words. Your mother, she teacher. Yes. Mary nodded. She taught at a school in Boston before we came west. Boston. Doadidi repeated the unfamiliar word. Far place. Very far. Mary confirmed. Beyond the Great Plains. Beyond many mountains. Next to the ocean. Why leave ocean for mountains? Mary's expression grew solemn. Father said we could have our own land here. Build something that belonged to us. Doadidi's face remained impassive, but her eyes reflected complex emotions. Land. Always the source of conflict between their peoples. By midday, Sarah's clay mask had dried to a light grey crust. Doadidi helped her from the pool and carefully peeled away the mask. To everyone's surprise, the clay came away stained with yellow-green discharge, drawing out the infection as promised. Good. Doadidi nodded with satisfaction. Again tomorrow. That afternoon, while Sarah rested, Doadidi showed the children how to gather edible plants that somehow grew in the sheltered canyon, despite the winter season. Together they created a simple stew of fish, roots and wild onions. As they ate around the fire, little Hannah asked, Are the bad men still up there? She pointed toward the canyon rim. Doadidi had checked at dawn. The torches were gone, but fresh tracks in the snow above told her the raiders were still searching nearby. Yes, she answered honestly, but not find way down if careful. Why does your brother want to hurt us? William asked. We never did anything to him. Doadidi was silent for a long moment. My brother, Naiche lose wife and daughters when soldiers attack winter camp 3 winters ago. Now he see all whites as enemies. But we're not soldiers, Thomas protested. To him, all settlers bring soldiers later. Doadidi explained. He thinks only way for our people survive is all whites leave or die. Sarah, who had been listening from her pallet, spoke up weakly. And what do you think, Doadidi? The Apache woman tended the fire, avoiding their eyes. I think hate brings more hate. Death brings more death. She looked up, meeting Sarah's gaze across the flames. Must be another way. That evening, as darkness settled over the canyon, Doadidi taught the children simple Apache words: water, fire, fish, sky. In return, Sarah, somewhat strengthened by the day's treatment, helped Doadidi with English words she didn't know. A fragile bridge was forming between worlds that had known only bloodshed. Outside their small sanctuary, danger still circled, but within the healing waters of the canyon, something new and unexpected was taking root. On the third morning in the canyon, Doadidi rose before dawn to check the rim. The winter sun had yet to touch the eastern edges when she spotted it, a flat stone placed carefully on a boulder near one of the hidden paths down. A tracking stone used by Apache scouts to mark a trail. They had been discovered. Doadidi returned to the cave, her face betraying nothing of her concern. Sarah was awake, sitting up for the first time since their arrival. The healing treatments were working. Her fever had broken during the night, and the wound looked cleaner, less angry. "You're troubled," Sarah observed, watching Doadidi gather her weapons. "Hunters come," Doadidi replied simply. "Found up a path." Thomas, who had taken to rising early to help Doadidi with morning tasks, overheard. "The raiders. What can we do?" "Hide," Doadidi said. "I cover tracks. Set false trail." Sarah struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. "We can't keep running forever." "Not forever," Doadidi agreed. "Until strong enough." While the younger children still slept, Doadidi led Sarah and Thomas to a narrow fissure in the canyon wall, hidden behind a cascade of water from one of the upper springs. Behind the waterfall lay a small cavern, long used by her people as a hiding place during times of war. "Stay," she instructed, helping Sarah sit on the dry stone floor. "No fire, no noise. What about you?" Thomas asked, his young face set with worry. "I lead away," Doadidi replied. "Come back when safe." Sarah caught her arm. "Be careful. We need you." The simple admission carried the weight of their shared journey. Doadidi nodded once, then slipped away to wake the other children and bring them to the hiding place. Once all were safely concealed, she set about erasing signs of their presence in the main cave and around the springs. As she worked, Doadidi considered her options. The tracking stone meant scouts had found one of the paths down, likely the main trail they had used. But there were other ways into and out of the canyon, known only to her and a few tribal elders. She deliberately left partial footprints leading to the far end of the canyon, away from the hidden cavern. There she scattered a few small items: a child's hair ribbon, a piece of dried fish, suggesting the family had moved on. Then she climbed halfway up the main trail and wedged her warhawker into a crack in the stone wall, as if dropped during a hasty ascent. By mid-morning, voices echoed from the canyon rim. Doadidi melted into the shadows of an overhanging rock, watching as three men carefully picked their way down the main trail. She recognized her brother Naiche immediately, tall and broad-shouldered, with a distinctive scar across his left cheek. The other two were younger warriors, one Apache, one Comanche, both with the hard eyes of men who had seen too much death. "They were here," Naiche said in Apache, kneeling to examine the fire pit in the main cave. "Recently." The Comanche warrior spotted Doadidi's hawker on the trail. "They left in a hurry," he said, retrieving the weapon. "Climbed out." Naiche took the hawker, turning it in his hands with a frown. "This is my sister's." The other Apache looked surprised. "Doadidi, she helps the settlers." "So it seems," Naiche replied, his voice cold. "She always had strange ideas since losing her family. The tracks lead that way." The Comanche pointed toward Doadidi's false trail, toward the western pass. Naiche studied the canyon carefully, his experienced eyes taking in details others might miss. For a heart-stopping moment, his gaze passed over Doadidi's hiding place, then moved on. "Follow the tracks," he ordered the others. "I will search here more carefully." As the two younger warriors moved toward the false trail, Naiche walked slowly around the hot springs. He knelt beside one pool, touching the clay residue at its edge, evidence of Doadidi's healing treatment for Sarah. "I know you're here, sister," he called suddenly, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "You were always clever, but you taught me too well." Doadidi remained motionless in her hiding place, scarcely breathing. "These settlers bring nothing but death," Naiche continued. "Have you forgotten what they did to your husband, to your son?" From the hidden cavern, Doadidi heard a child's muffled cough. Naiche's head snapped toward the sound, a predator sensing prey. "Ah," he smiled grimly. "There you are." As he moved toward the waterfall, Doadidi made her decision. She stepped from the shadows, arrow knocked in her bow. "Brother," she said quietly. Naiche turned, his hand dropping to his knife. When he saw her, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps even relief, quickly masked by hardened resolve.
"Why do you protect them?" he demanded. "After everything?" "They are innocent," Doadidi replied. "Children, a mother. There are no innocent settlers," Naiche spat. "Each one takes our land, brings more behind them. Like my son was not innocent?" Doadidi challenged. "Killed for being Apache." Naiche faltered. "That was different." "No," Doadidi said firmly. "Killing children is never different." Brother and sister faced each other across the canyon floor, years of shared history and divergent paths hanging between them like an invisible thread. "You would raise your bow against your own blood?" Naishe asked, his voice low. Didi's aim remained steady. "I would stop more innocent deaths, as should you." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Naishe slowly raised his empty hands. "The others will return soon. Let me see these settlers you risk everything to protect." Didi hesitated, then lowered her bow slightly. "Weapons stay here." Naishe unbuckled his knife belt and laid it beside a rock, along with his tomahawk. Didi led him toward the waterfall, keeping a cautious distance. "Thomas," she called, "bring your mother out. Keep others inside." After a moment's pause, Thomas emerged from behind the cascade, supporting Sarah. Her head was still wrapped in bandages, but she stood straighter, her eyes clear and alert, despite her obvious weakness. Naishe stared at Sarah's bandaged head, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You healed her scalp wound." "She fought to live," Didi replied, "for her children." "You were always too soft-hearted, sister," Naishe said, but the edge had left his voice. Sarah studied the warrior with unflinching directness. "Your quarrel is with me, not my children. If blood must be paid, take mine alone." Naishe seemed surprised by her courage. "You speak bravely for one so close to death's door." "I have faced death already," Sarah replied. "It holds no fear for me now." From behind the waterfall, little Edward began to cry. The sound, a baby's distress, visibly affected Naishe, his stern expression faltering. "6 children?" he asked Didi. She nodded, like talks at night had before the soldiers came. The reference to their sister, who had lost her family in a cavalry attack 3 winters past, struck home. Naishe turned away, staring into the distance. "The cycle must end somewhere, brother," Didi said quietly. Before Naishe could respond, shouts echoed from above. The other warriors were returning, having discovered the false trail. "Go," Naishe said suddenly, turning back to them. "Take the southern passage. I will tell them you headed east toward the trader's post." Didi searched her brother's face, finding conflict there but also resolution. "Why?" Sarah asked. Naishe looked at her directly. "I do not spare you, settler woman. I spare my sister more grief." He turned to Didi. "The others would not understand your choice. It is better they believe you were never here." As Didi quickly gathered the family's few belongings, Thomas discovered a small wooden toy soldier half buried in the sand near the cave, a relic from some long-ago Apache child who had played with a trade item from the white world. "Can I keep it?" the youngest boy, William, asked when Thomas showed him the find. Didi glanced at Naishe, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Southern passage narrow," Didi warned Sarah. "Hard journey."
"We'll manage," Sarah assured her.
She turned to Naishe. "Thank you." The warrior's face hardened. "Do not thank me. If we meet again outside this canyon, I cannot promise the same mercy." As they prepared to leave, Didi approached her brother one last time. They spoke briefly in Apache, too low for the others to hear. Sarah watched as Didi removed a small carved thunderbird amulet from around her neck and pressed it into her brother's hand. He closed his fingers around it, his stern expression softening momentarily. The southern passage proved as challenging as Didi had warned, a narrow fissure in the rock that required them to turn sideways in places. Sarah struggled with her weakened condition, but Thomas and Didi supported her steadfastly. Once clear of the canyon, Didi led them toward a ridge that would provide both shelter and a vantage point to watch for pursuers. As they climbed, Thomas asked the question that had been troubling him. "Will your brother really let us go?" Didi considered this. "Today, yes. Tomorrow," she shrugged. Nayaka's heart divided. "Grief and anger fight with honor, like yours once did?" Sarah asked perceptively. Didi nodded. "Still does, sometimes." That evening, as they made camp in a sheltered hollow, Didi fashioned crude weapons from branches and stones, a small bow for Thomas, a knife for herself, spears for hunting. The peaceful healer had fully embraced the warrior's path again, preparing for the possibility that her brother's protection would not extend beyond the canyon's edge. Sarah watched Didi work, her skilled hands shaping wood with practiced precision. "You fought before, haven't you? Not just hunted." "Was warrior before healer," Didi admitted. "After husband, son killed, I led war party against soldiers." Her hands stilled. "Killed many, found no peace in death. So you chose another way," Sarah said softly. "Tried," Didi corrected, testing the edge of her stone knife. "Now old path finds me again." As darkness fell, she taught Thomas basic defensive moves, how to hold the bow, where to strike with a knife if cornered. The boy learned quickly, his young face serious beyond his years. "I won't let them hurt my family," he promised. Didi placed the carved thunderbird she had shown Naishe into Thomas's palm.
Courage here, she said, touching his chest, not in weapon. The next morning, Dardidi slipped away before dawn, climbing to a high vantage point to scout their surroundings. When she returned 2 hours later, her expression was grim. Raiders camped below, she reported, crouching beside Sarah. Not brothers group, different men, 5, maybe 6. Did they see you? Thomas asked, clutching the small bow she had made for him. Dardidi shook her head, but found tracks. They search in wrong direction now, but soon turn this way. Sarah, who grew stronger with each passing day despite her wound, asked, can we go around them? Mountains too steep, Dardidi replied, only one path forward. While gathering their meager supplies, William discovered a weathered piece of paper wedged in a rock crevice. He brought it to his mother, curious about the official-looking document with its broken wax seal. Sarah unfolded it carefully. It's a treaty, she said, surprise evident in her voice, between the Apache Nation and the United States government. She scanned the faded text, signed 3 years ago. Dardidi's expression darkened. Many papers, many promises, all broken. Sarah continued reading. It guarantees protection of traditional Apache hunting grounds in exchange for safe passage for settlers along the southern route. She looked up. Did you know about this? Chief signed. Dardidi confirmed. Then soldiers came anyway, built fort on sacred land. When people protested, soldiers attacked winter camp. Women, children killed. Her eyes held Sarah's. My sister's family, many others. Sarah's face paled. When was this? 3 winters past. Near Wolf Mountain. Sarah's hand trembled as she refolded the treaty. My husband's regiment was stationed near Wolf Mountain 3 years ago. The implication hung heavy in the cold mountain air. Your husband, soldier, Dardidi asked, her voice carefully neutral. Sarah nodded slowly. A captain in the cavalry. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. The children watched anxiously, sensing the sudden tension. Finally, Dardidi asked, did he write of battle with Apache? He mentioned skirmishes, Sarah admitted, but never details. He said it was better I didn't know certain things. Dardidi absorbed this, her face unreadable. Your husband may have killed my people. My brother's warriors killed yours. Now we both help each other live. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Strange path ancestors show. I don't know what my husband did, Sarah said carefully, but I know what you did for us. That matters more to me than the past. Dardidi studied her for a moment, then nodded once. Must move now. Raiders will find trails soon. As they prepared to leave, Thomas approached Dardidi hesitantly. If your brother let us go, why are these other raiders still hunting us? Not all follow Naishe, she explained. Some want revenge only. No honor, no rules. Like the men who attacked our homestead, Sarah added, understanding dawning. Yes, Dardidi confirmed. Renegades, broken from tribe ways.
They traveled cautiously through the morning, taking a circuitous route to avoid the raiders' camp. By midday, they reached a narrow pass between 2 sheer cliffs, a natural bottleneck that could not be avoided. Dardidi halted the group, studying the terrain with concern. Perfect place for ambush, as if confirming her fears, a stone clattered down from the cliff above. Dardidi pushed the family back against the rock wall, arrow nocked and ready. Show yourself, she called in Apache. A moment of silence, then a familiar voice responded. Still protecting them, sister? Naishe appeared on the ridge above, alone and carrying only a knife. The others searched the eastern valleys, he said, climbing down to join them. But Broken Nose and his men are close behind you. They found your trail at the canyon exit. You followed us, Dardidi accused. I followed them, Naishe corrected. Broken Nose's warriors have no honor. They kill for pleasure now, not justice. He looked at Sarah and the children with a complex expression. Even I would not see children suffer such men's cruelty. Why warn us? Sarah asked. Naishe's gaze lingered on her bandaged head. My sister chose to save you. I respect her choice, even if I do not understand it. He turned to Dardidi. I cannot openly help you without losing my position among the warriors. But I can tell you this, Broken Nose plans to ambush you at Hawk's Crossing, 2 miles ahead. We have nowhere else to go, Dardidi said, frustrated. Naishe considered this. There is another way. Dangerous, but the renegades won't know it. He hesitated. It means trusting me. Sarah and Dardidi exchanged glances. After a moment, Sarah nodded. Show us, Dardidi said. As they followed Naishe along a nearly invisible game trail, Sarah walked beside Dardidi. Why does he help us now? She asked quietly. Dardidi watched her brother's back as he led them forward. Naishe follows honor code of our father. Once he would have helped anyone in need. She paused. War changed him, changed us all. And you, Sarah asked, what code do you follow now? Dardidi touched the place where her Thunderbird amulet had hung before she gave it to Thomas, the one that brought me to Frozen Lake that day. Dark clouds gathered on the western horizon as Naishe led them through a labyrinth of narrow ravines. The air grew heavy with the promise of snow, and the wind carried the distinct scent of an approaching blizzard. "Storm comes," Dadidi observed, glancing at the sky. "Big one," Naishe nodded grimly. "Before nightfall, we must reach the trader's cabin before it hits." "Trader's cabin?" Sarah asked, adjusting baby Edward in her arms. "White man called Ferguson," Naishe explained. "Trades with all tribes, even in war times. Territory considers him neutral ground." Dadidi exchanged a meaningful look with her brother. "Broken Nose respects this." "Not likely," Naishe admitted, "but Storm will cover your tracks. Maybe give enough time to reach settlement beyond." As they paused to rest, Naishe pulled something from his pouch, a small wooden carving of a thunderbird, its wings outstretched in flight. He offered it to Thomas. "For courage," he said simply. "My father made this when I was younger than you." Thomas accepted the gift with solemn reverence. "Thank you." Sarah watched this exchange with surprise. "You're helping us at great risk to yourself," she said to Naishe. "Why?" The warrior's scarred face remained impassive. "I have seen too much death, children without mothers, mothers without children." He glanced at Dadidi. "My sister chose a different path from mine. Perhaps..." Before anyone could respond, a distant whoop echoed through the ravine. Naishe tensed, reaching for his knife. "They've found our trail," he said tersely. "We must split up. Dadidi, take them through Bear Claw Pass. I'll lead the renegades away." "Too dangerous alone," Dadidi protested. "I know these mountains better than Broken Nose," Naishe insisted. "Go now." As Naishe disappeared down a side canyon, the first heavy snowflakes began to fall. Within minutes, the gentle snowfall transformed into a driving blizzard, visibility dropping to mere feet. "Perfect timing," Sarah remarked, pulling her children close. "Storm is both friend and enemy," Dadidi replied, securing Edward inside her fur wrap. "Hides us but can kill us too." They struggled forward through increasingly treacherous conditions. The children, exhausted from days of travel, began to falter. William stumbled repeatedly, while Hannah wept silently from cold and fatigue. "How much farther?" Thomas shouted over the howling wind. "Not know," Dadidi admitted. "In storm all landmarks vanish." A sudden gust nearly knocked Mary off her feet. Thomas caught his sister just before she would have plunged into a snow-covered crevasse. "We need shelter now," Sarah insisted, her face etched with concern for her children. Dadidi nodded, scanning the white wasteland desperately. Through the swirling snow, she spotted a dark shape, a jumble of boulders that might offer minimal protection. "There," she pointed, leading them toward the rocks. They had just reached the meager shelter when shouts carried through the storm, muffled but unmistakable. Human voices, too close for comfort. "Down," Dadidi commanded, pushing everyone flat against the snow. Two shadowy figures emerged from the white curtain of snow, barely 30 yards away. Even through the storm, Dadidi recognized them, scouts from Broken Nose's band. "Stay here," she whispered to Sarah, "no matter what happens." Before Sarah could protest, Dadidi had slipped away, moving like a ghost through the blinding snow. The children watched wide-eyed as she circled behind the scouts, becoming nearly invisible in the storm. What happened next occurred in near silence. One scout suddenly crumpled to the ground. The second turned, knife drawn, but found only empty whiteness. Moments later, he too collapsed. Dadidi reappeared at their shelter, snow caking her furs, her expression grim. "Not dead," she explained, seeing the horror on the children's faces. "Sleep only." "But they'll freeze in this storm," Sarah said. "Left them shelter," Dadidi replied. "Their problem now." The storm intensified to a deafening roar. Moving forward became nearly impossible, each step a battle against the wind and accumulating snow. Dadidi tied a rope around everyone's waists to prevent separation, but even this precaution proved insufficient. A massive gust struck without warning, its force like a physical blow. Sarah lost her grip on Hannah's hand. The little girl's scream was swallowed by the wind as she was torn away, disappearing instantly into the white void. "Hannah!" Sarah's desperate cry was barely audible. Thomas immediately plunged after his sister, vanishing into the blizzard before Dadidi could stop him. "Thomas! Hannah!" Sarah struggled to follow, but Dadidi held her back. "Stay with others," she commanded. "I find them." The remaining family huddled together as Dadidi followed the children's rapidly disappearing tracks. Within moments, she too was swallowed by the storm, leaving Sarah alone with William, Mary, Alice, and baby Edward in the howling whiteness, their small group now shattered like leaves scattered by the merciless wind. Sarah stared into the whiteout, clutching her remaining children close. The storm's roar seemed to mock her desperate calls for Thomas and Hannah. With each passing moment, the tracks leading away from their shelter disappeared under fresh snow. "We have to find shelter," she told William, her oldest remaining child. "We can't help them if we freeze to death ourselves." Despite her own terror, Sarah forced herself to think clearly.
Didi had been teaching them survival skills each day of their journey. What would the Apache woman do now? Sarah gathered pine branches, creating a crude windbreak against a large boulder. She positioned the children in the small protected space, using her body to shield baby Edward from the worst of the cold. "William, keep everyone moving," she instructed. "Rub hands, feet, faces, don't let anyone sleep." Miles away, through the same punishing storm, Didi tracked Thomas and Hannah with the preternatural skill of a lifetime spent in the mountains. The boy had managed to catch his sister, their tracks showing where he had grabbed her, only to have both of them tumble down a snow-covered slope. Following their trail, Didi found a small cave formed by a fallen tree and an overhanging rock. Inside, Thomas huddled with Hannah, his coat wrapped around his sister's smaller body. "Smart boy," Didi approved, crouching beside them, "found good shelter." "I couldn't let her go," Thomas said, teeth chattering. "Father always says family stays together." Didi nodded, quickly gathering materials for a small, smokeless fire. "Good rule. Now we find way back to others. In this," Hannah gestured toward the howling storm outside. "Wait little while," Didi decided. "Storm peak pass soon, then go." As they huddled by the tiny flame, Thomas asked, "Will the raiders find Mother and the others?" Didi's face remained impassive, but her eyes revealed her concern. "Storm hides all. Good for hiding, bad for finding." Back at the boulder shelter, Sarah had made a difficult decision. Staying in place meant certain death from exposure. They needed to find better protection. "We're going to move," she told her children, securing Edward inside her coat. "Hold hands no matter what." Sarah used a broken branch as a walking stick, probing the snow ahead for hidden drop-offs. The wind drove ice crystals against their faces like tiny knives, but she pressed forward, guided by instinct and desperate hope. After what seemed like hours, her walking stick met empty air rather than solid ground. Sarah dropped to her knees, brushing away snow to reveal a split arrowhead of Apache design, and beyond it, the edge of a sheer cliff. "Back," she gasped, pulling the children away from certain death. "We have to go back." The cliff's presence gave her a reference point. If they followed its edge, they might find a way down to lower elevation where the storm would be less severe. Meanwhile, a third group moved through the blizzard, Broken Nose and his 3 remaining warriors. They had found the unconscious scouts and revived them, then continued tracking their quarry despite the storm. Their determination was fueled by a hatred that burned hotter than any fear of the elements. "The woman and her brats can't have gone far," Broken Nose snarled to his men. "Find them." But even as he gave the order, one warrior pointed to a new set of tracks partially visible despite the falling snow. A man's footprints too large to belong to the boy or the Apache woman. "Naike?" Broken Nose growled, recognizing the distinctive pattern of his former leader's moccasins. "So the rumors are true. He betrays us for these settlers." The renegades split into 2 groups, Broken Nose and one warrior following Naike's trail, while the other 2 continued hunting for the woman and children.
As the day waned toward evening, the storm's fury began to abate slightly. In their small cave, Didi sensed the change. "Time to go," she told Thomas and Hannah. "Find Mother before dark." They emerged into a transformed landscape, every feature smoothed and altered by feet of new snow. Didi studied the terrain, trying to determine which direction would lead back to Sarah and the others. Suddenly, Hannah pointed to a distant ridge. "Look, something moved." Squinting through the diminishing snowfall, Didi saw a figure silhouetted against the white, too large to be one of the children, too small to be Sarah carrying the baby. "Hide," she commanded, pulling the children back into the shelter. Thomas peered around the fallen log. "Is it the raiders?" Before Didi could answer, a mountain lion padded into view less than 50 yards away. The massive cat paused, lifting its head to test the wind. "Don't move," Didi whispered. "Wind in our favor now, cat not smell us yet." The lion moved with deliberate slowness along the ridge, heading in the same direction Sarah and the other children had likely gone. "It's hunting," Thomas realized with horror. Didi reached for her knife. "We follow, careful." Miles away, Sarah sensed rather than saw the danger stalking her small group. Something moved in the swirling snow behind them, shadow figures barely visible through the white curtain. Her instincts screamed a warning. "Faster," she urged her exhausted children. "We must move faster." In that moment, miles apart yet connected by unseen threads of fate, both women felt a powerful certainty. They needed to find each other, and quickly. The mountain had become a deadly maze of converging predators, human and animal alike, with 6 innocent children caught in the middle. Didi moved through the snow like a shadow, Thomas and Hannah following in her precise footsteps. The mountain lion's tracks led toward a rocky outcropping where the beast would have a commanding view of the valley below, perfect for spotting prey. Mother could be down there, Thomas whispered, voicing Dardidi's own fear. A sound made them freeze. Voices carried on the wind, speaking Apache. Dardidi pulled the children behind a snowdrift, listening intently. Broken nose follows Nike, she translated for Thomas. 2 others hunt for your mother. We have to warn her, Hannah insisted. First deal with lion. Dardidi replied grimly. Then raiders. They continued their careful tracking until they reached the outcropping. The great cat was nowhere in sight, but its prints continued down toward the valley floor. Dardidi's experienced eyes read the snow like a book. The lion had caught a scent and was moving with purpose. Hurry, she urged, no longer bothering with stealth. They had descended halfway to the valley when a familiar figure appeared through the thinning snowfall, Nai, moving swiftly across the slope. He spotted them immediately and changed course. Sister, he called, broken nose follows me. Where are the others? Lost in storm, Dardidi replied tersely. Mountain lion hunts them. Nai's expression darkened. The cat I can help with. Broken nose, he touched the knife at his belt. A problem I should have solved long ago. These children saw enough death, Dardidi said sharply. Before Naiche could respond, Thomas pointed urgently. Look, below them, a flash of movement revealed Sarah and the other children emerging from a stand of pines. Behind them, barely visible in the tree shadows, the tawny shape of the mountain lion crouched, preparing to spring. Without hesitation, Naiche raised his arm and let fly a knife with deadly accuracy. The blade struck near the cat, embedding in a tree trunk with a solid thunk. Startled, the predator retreated back into the forest. Sarah looked up, spotting them on the slope above. Her face transformed with relief at the sight of Thomas and Hannah. She waved frantically, pointing behind her toward the trees. She sees the raiders, Dardidi realized, following Sarah's gesture. 2 figures were visible now, moving through the forest where the lion had been. Get your family to those rocks, Naiche instructed, pointing to a formation of boulders. I will deal with broken nose when he arrives. No, Dardidi grabbed her brother's arm. Enough blood. Around her neck, Naiche spotted something he hadn't seen in years, a small hide pouch containing a childhood necklace they had once shared, split between them when they came of age. He had thought his half lost years ago. You kept it, he said, surprised. Dardidi nodded. To remember who we were before hate filled our hearts. A shout from behind interrupted them. Broken Nose and his companion had spotted them from higher on the slope. Go, Naiche urged. I will hold them here. They will kill you, Dardidi protested. Perhaps, he acknowledged. Or perhaps it is time for our people to choose a different path. Thomas, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. We'll stay with you. Naiche looked at the boy with newfound respect. Your mother needs you, and Dardidi needs her brother, Thomas replied with simple clarity. Below, Sarah had gathered her children behind the rocks Naiche had indicated. She watched the tableau on the hillside with growing concern. Dardidi made a swift decision. Thomas, take Hannah to your mother. Tell her we come soon. Once the children were safely away, she turned to her brother. We faced them together. Minutes later, Broken Nose and his warrior crested the ridge, weapons drawn. They halted at the sight of brother and sister standing side by side. So it's true, Broken Nose sneered. The great war chief protects white settlers. I protect innocent lives, Naiche replied evenly. As we once swore to do. They are settlers, Broken Nose spat. Their kind murdered our families, and how many of their families have we murdered in return? Dardidi challenged. Does the killing bring our loved ones back? Broken Nose's face contorted with rage. Step aside or die with them. There has been enough death, Naiche said firmly. The renegade band is finished. Return to the tribe and face the council's judgment, or leave these mountains forever. For a moment, it seemed Broken Nose would attack regardless. Then, unexpectedly, his companion lowered his weapon. He speaks truth, the warrior said quietly. This path leads nowhere but more graves. Broken Nose turned on him furiously. Coward. No, the warrior replied. Tired of blood and cold and running. The old ones taught us to be protectors, not butchers. From below, Sarah and her children watched the confrontation unfold. Though they couldn't understand the words, the tension was unmistakable. Will they fight? William asked anxiously. I don't know, Sarah answered honestly, but I believe in Dardidi. With a howl of rage, he lunged at Naiche, knife flashing in the fading light. What followed was a brief, brutal struggle that ended with Broken Nose disarmed, and on his knees, Naiche's blade at his throat. Do it, Broken Nose snarled. Finish it. Naiche looked at his sister. After a long moment, he lowered his knife. No more killing, he said. Find another way, or next time I will not be so merciful.
As Broken Nose and his chastened companion retreated into the gathering dusk, Dee placed her hand on her brother's shoulder. "You chose well," she said softly. Nightshade touched the childhood necklace at her throat. "Perhaps there is wisdom in remembering who we once were." Together, they descended to where Sarah waited with the children. The family finally reunited beneath the clearing skies. Night was falling fast as the reunited group made their way across the valley floor. Nightshade led them toward a formation visible in the distance, an ancient circle of standing stones, placed there by people long forgotten even to the Apache. "Sacred place," he explained to Sarah, "protected by spirits. Good shelter." The exhausted family stumbled the final distance to the stone circle. Within its perimeter, the wind seemed to die away, as if the massive stones themselves shielded them from the elements. "Will Broken Nose return?" Sarah asked as they settled the children in the most protected corner of the circle. "Yes," Nightshade replied without hesitation, his pride wounded worse than body. "He gather others, come at dawn." "How many?" Thomas asked, his young face serious. 4, maybe 5, Nightshade estimated. "Not all renegades follow him now." Dee surveyed their meager resources, her knife, Nightshade's bow and remaining arrows, the crude weapons she had fashioned for Thomas. Against armed warriors, their chances were slim. "We could run during night," she suggested. Nightshade shook his head. "Children too tired. Storm returns by morning." He gestured to the heavy clouds gathering on the horizon. "Better make stand here." As the adults conferred, Sarah watched her children huddled together for warmth. They had survived impossible odds already. The raid, the frozen lake, the scalping, the blizzard. Now they faced perhaps their greatest challenge. "There must be a way besides fighting," she said suddenly. "Haven't we all seen enough blood?" Dee and Nightshade exchanged glances. "What you suggest?" Dee asked. "Parley," Sarah replied. "Talk to them. Show them we're not enemies." Nightshade's scarred face registered surprise. "You would talk to men who took your scalp, who tried to drown your children?" "Yes," Sarah said firmly, "if it means no more death." Through the night, they prepared for both possibilities, battle and peace. Nightshade showed Thomas and William how to position stones for cover, while Dee and Sarah gathered what could be used for defense. The smaller children were tucked into a natural hollow beneath one of the largest stones, with strict instructions to remain hidden, no matter what occurred. As dawn approached, Nightshade touched his sister's arm. "Riders coming." In the grey light, they could make out 6 figures approaching on horseback. Broken Nose had indeed gathered reinforcements. "More than expected," Dee noted grimly. Sarah straightened her shoulders, touching the bandage that still covered her healing scalp wound. "I will speak to them first." "Too dangerous," Nightshade objected. "They've already taken my scalp," Sarah replied with grim humor. "What more can they do?" "Kill you," Dee said bluntly. "Kill children." "Then we all speak together," Sarah insisted. "Show them we stand united." As the riders approached the stone circle, Nightshade, Dee, Sarah and Thomas, who refused to stay hidden, stepped forward. They stood shoulder to shoulder at the circle's entrance, an unlikely alliance. Broken Nose halted his horse, surprise evident even at a distance. He had expected to find frightened settlers hiding behind Nightshade, not standing beside him as equals. "You bring shame to your people." He called to Nightshade in Apache, "Standing with the enemy." "I see no enemies here," Nightshade replied loudly. "Only a woman protecting her children, as our mothers once protected us." Broken Nose dismounted, advancing on foot with his warriors spreading out behind him. His face was a mask of contempt as he surveyed the small group. "The settler woman still lives," he noted, eyes fixing on Sarah's bandaged head. "Our work was poorly done. Your work was dishonorable," Dee countered. "Attacking women and children brings no glory. They are settlers," Broken Nose shouted. "Each one who lives brings 10 more behind them." Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. "I understand your anger. Your people have suffered greatly at the hands of mine." Broken Nose was momentarily taken aback by her directness. "You understand nothing, white woman." "I understand loss," Sarah replied. "I understand fear for my children's future. And I understand that killing creates only more killing." "Pretty words," Broken Nose sneered. "Will you feel the same when more soldiers come to drive us from our lands, when more of our children starve in winter?" "The children," Sarah said quietly. "That's what matters, isn't it? Yours and mine." She gestured toward the stone hollow where her younger children huddled. Then she pointed to Broken Nose's warriors. "These young men, they could build instead of destroy, hunt instead of raid. What future are you leading them toward?" One of the younger warriors shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. Another looked away, unable to meet Sarah's direct gaze. Broken Nose sensed the wavering resolve of his men. His hand dropped to his knife. "Enough talk," he snarled. "Step aside, Nightshade, or die with them." Nightshade stood his ground. "I choose to stand with honor, with life." He raised his voice, addressing the warriors behind Broken Nose. "Each of you must choose as well. Follow a path of endless vengeance, or find a new way forward." For a long moment, no one moved. The fate of all hung in balance as Broken Nose's hand tightened on his knife. Behind him, the warriors looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. Then, unexpectedly, the youngest warrior turned his horse. "I have chosen," he said simply, and rode away. One by one the others followed, until only Broken Nose remained, his face contorted with fury and disbelief. "Cowards!" he shouted after them. "Traitors!" Alone now, he turned back to face the small group at the stone circle. His eyes burned with hatred as he drew his knife. "If I must do this alone," he growled, "then so be it." Broken Nose charged forward, knife raised for a killing blow. Nightshade stepped to meet him, their bodies colliding in a brutal contest of strength. The two men grappled at the edge of the stone circle, each seeking advantage. Thomas notched an arrow in his small bow but couldn't find a clear shot. Sarah pulled him back as the fighting men tumbled to the ground. "This is between them now," Dardidi said quietly. The struggle was brief but fierce. Though fueled by rage, Broken Nose was outmatched by Nightshade's superior skill. Within moments, Nightshade had disarmed his opponent and pinned him to the frozen ground. "Finish it," Broken Nose gasped, blood streaming from his nose. "Send me to the ancestors." Nightshade held his knife poised at the renegade's throat. Then slowly, deliberately, he stood and stepped back. "No," he said firmly, "your hate dies today, but you will live to find a better path." Broken Nose lay panting in the snow, rage giving way to confusion, then to a hollow emptiness visible in his eyes. Without his warriors, without his vendetta, he seemed suddenly diminished. "What would you have me do?" he asked bitterly. "Go north to Grandfather Mountain," Nightshade instructed. "Elder Tall Pine leads a band there who follow the old ways. Tell him I sent you to remember who our people truly are." Broken Nose rose unsteadily. He looked at the small family gathered in the stone circle, at Dardidi and Nightshade standing protectively beside them. Something shifted in his expression. Not acceptance, not yet forgiveness, but perhaps the first recognition that another way might exist. Without another word, he collected his knife, mounted his horse, and rode away into the gathering storm. As snow began to fall once more, Nightshade turned to Sarah. "Trading post 1 day's journey south. From there, settlement another day east. You'll come with us?" Sarah asked. Nightshade shook his head. "My path leads elsewhere. Must speak with tribal council. Tell what happened here." He glanced at his sister. "Perhaps change minds, as mine was changed." Thomas stepped forward, offering the Thunderbird carving back to Nightshade. The warrior smiled, perhaps his first genuine smile in years, and closed the boy's fingers around it. "Keep," he said. "Remember this day." By midday, they reached the trading post, a sturdy log structure nestled in a protected valley. Ferguson, the trader, was a weathered man with a grey beard and kind eyes, who welcomed them without question. His Cheyenne wife, Swift Deer, immediately took charge of Sarah's wound, applying fresh poultices and clean bandages. "You're healing remarkably well," she told Sarah with surprise. "Who treated you?" Sarah glanced at Dardidi, who stood quietly by the door. "A friend." That evening, as the children slept on buffalo robes before the fire, Ferguson shared news that made Sarah's heart leap. "Army patrol came through 3 days ago," he said. Captain Thornwood was leading them, searching for his family after finding his homestead destroyed. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "James is alive? Here?" Ferguson nodded. "They headed west, but they'll circle back within a week." Later, beneath a sky scattered with stars, Dardidi prepared to depart. Sarah stood with her at the edge of the trading post clearing. "You won't wait to meet James?" Sarah asked. Dardidi shook her head. "Better I go. Too many memories between our peoples. What will you do now?" "Return to Canyon," Dardidi replied. "Then perhaps join Nike. Help build new understanding between our peoples." Sarah embraced her, this woman who had saved her family through impossible odds. "We owe you our lives. You showed courage," Dardidi replied. "Taught me hate not only path." From the trading post doorway, Thomas watched their farewell. At 12 years old, he understood more than most children his age, the significance of what had transpired in these mountains. "Will we see you again?" he called. Dardidi smiled. "Perhaps. Mountains have many paths that cross." 2 years later, at a territorial peace council, Sarah Thornwood stood beside her husband, Captain James Thornwood, as he signed a new treaty with the Apache Nation. Her scalp had healed remarkably well, though she wore her hair differently now to cover the scars. Across the gathering, she spotted a familiar face, Dardidi, dressed in the formal attire of a tribal representative. Beside her stood Nightshade, now a respected voice for peace among his people. The two women's eyes met across the crowded room. No words were needed between them. Their bond transcended language, forged in ice and blood and shared survival. Later, as the formal proceedings concluded, Dardidi approached the Thornwood family. In her hands, she carried a beautiful woven blanket, which she presented to Sarah with solemn ceremony. "From my people to yours," she said in much improved English. "May it protect your family as you once protected mine." Sarah accepted the gift, understanding its deeper meaning, a symbol of the bridge they had built between two worlds, a testament to the power of compassion, to thaw even the coldest hatred. Thomas, now 14 and tall for his age, stepped forward with pride. Around his neck hung the Thunderbird carving, a constant reminder of those desperate days in the mountains, when enemies became saviors, and unlikely bonds changed the course of their lives forever. "The children," Sarah said softly, echoing her words from the stone circle. "That's what matters, isn't it? Yours and mine." Dardidi nodded. a rare smile warming her face. Yes, always the children.